Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending, and instead, I alchemized it and put life back together. Through my own healing, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer and spiritual teacher, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. Today's episode is about something I've gotten a lot of experience with as I learn more and continue to evolve. The reality of spiritual contradictions. Or is it no longer a contradiction if I understand the nuances and complexities within the tools and situations at hand? Allow me to explain. So you guys know I'm all about radical responsibility. In the beginning of my healing journey, spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it, I welcomed the responsibility with open arms. I understood that taking responsibility for all that was coming or had come my way meant I was on the path to feeling better. I felt that in the deepest parts of my soul, so I didn't care who was right or wrong. That was of no interest to me. Sitting around pointing a finger did nothing. Think about it. What does it do? In my eyes, more harm than good. Now you might be confused and thinking, well, if someone doesn't acknowledge a wrong, how do they take responsibility? Well, I'm glad you asked, because taking responsibility has nothing to do with being right or wrong. It comes from a higher frequency place. It comes from taking responsibility for our side of the street. How we feel, how we want to feel, what we want to experience, how we want to show up. This is where the true desire comes from. Now, if we are solid in these things, does it matter who is right or wrong? Can we still want to upgrade and evolve or change something, even if we didn't see it one way or the other? If I'm in a given situation, I sure play a part. Doesn't matter if I'm playing the fairy godmother in a situation or the wicked witch. I still am in it for a reason. To get the most out of life, feel the best, and continue to align with what I want out of life, then seeing my part in it all is a must. Now, was my late husband Bob the wrong one for lying and being unfaithful and then taking his own life? I mean, sure, we could go that far, but what does that do for my healing? How does that help me get through a hard moment? How does it help any of us evolve? I learned nothing from just pointing the finger at someone else. If that brings some release, it's not a deep one worth nurturing. It's surface level. And I no longer subscribe to anything surface level in this life. I value my time and yours and everyone else's here way too much. Fulfillment, love, alignment, connection, laughter, happiness, joy, harmony, evolvement, growth, depth. That matters to me. Not what I get to point the finger at. And you might be thinking, if I don't tell someone they are wrong, how do they know? Think about it this way. Do you get on board with something more when someone tells you how you should feel or what you should do, or more when you come to a conclusion on your own? And if you said, I like being told what to do, or else I don't know what the other person wants, well, I would have to argue and say, you probably aren't using your intuition where you could be. You have a superpower laying dormant in your body. And as long as you rely on others for your own growth and to tell you what to do, that's the second you have become a prisoner to this life and how it unfolds. And you don't deserve that. I had the experience of not having Bob here to talk these things through with, past our handful of conversations once truths were revealed. And believe me, back then I did a lot of finger pointing. And the day he died, none of it mattered. I no longer cared whose fault it was. That action became empty. If I was waiting for him to take responsibility, to feel better and feel like I could heal, well, I was going to be waiting a long fucking time. So I got a front row seat to see how the fastest, most complete way to heal is actually to stay in my own lane and not worry about what the other person did, is doing, or has done. It's part of the journey for sure. But who's right or who's wrong? Not so much. Your next thought might be, so I just deserve what I get and I get no say or don't get to voice my opinion? Absolutely not. But if you want the cycle of pain to stop, if you want the pattern to break, you got to try something different. And if you found this podcast, you're into that sort of thing. You're into trying things and seeing what works because you know what you deserve. You know there is a life out there that you get to be a part of, and you're not afraid of tough conversations and using your reflective opportunities to get there. So, can you voice it? Sure. Voice it all you want. Is it getting you to the solve quickest? Most likely not, but we have moments of needing to just be. I've had my fair share of trying to explain to someone how I see it, to give that light bulb moment so they'll shift. So I and we can start feeling better and prevent future mishaps from happening. Well, just because something is wrong, does it necessarily keep it from happening? If that were the case, there would be no crime in this world. There would be no cheating or heartache. There would be no bullies. But that's not the world we live in. So until that's a reality, focusing our attention inward in a situation we don't like is going to be the quickest way through. Now, I know my example is extreme, but apply it to your life where it fits and makes sense. Placing blame is pretty much saying you're in the driver's seat and my reality I have no control over, and I have no control over how this life goes. And I have lived that life, and I have lived it that way, and it sucks. And I've tried it this way, and it's honestly one of the ways I made it out of my shitstorm alive. So what does taking responsibility look like? It means I see where I am the guiding force in my life. Yes, there is source, guides, angels, soul contracts, and the person on the front lines is me. So ultimately, I am creating what I see and feel. We are master creators, and we have the understanding, backed by the tools and strong connection to ourselves, the opportunities and ability to come out the other side. Any experience ends up being a given. We do not give ourselves enough credit, and I know that by how often we are to blame others for our feelings, giving that power to them. Can someone be a trigger to those feelings? Fuck yes. And thank you very much. Because without that trigger, I would be stuck in an old pattern, old ways, limiting beliefs, and thank goodness I have a pulse to feel and have emotions about things. So now I can see what needs my attention within. If you trigger me, I might not like it, but I know it has a purpose. I refuse to live in a world that I am here to be tortured. That's not the plan. That wasn't the reason we waited in line as souls like Black Friday outside of Apple to be miserable. Are we allowed to have those moments? Yes, please. But we are not put here to constantly be punished. So if you are feeling a certain way, try something new. Turn it within and see what you do have control over, and see how that changes the world around you. Remember, you don't have to understand it for it to be true and possible. That would mean we would need to understand every math equation, scientific experiment, and philosophy to mean it's possible. If I take responsibility, I make sense of how I got somewhere. If something unfavorable is happening and I don't like how I'm being treated, somehow along the way, I got myself here. Now you might be thinking, you're telling me I deserve being talked down to by my boss, or being neglected by my partner, or my kid being bullied at school? The answer is a hell no. And yes, there was something that we took on as a belief system, neglected ourselves on, thought about before all of those moments that allowed this experience to land in our lap. It is impossible for someone to say something to us that we haven't said to ourselves. It might be subconscious or such an ingrained belief that we don't even realize we're doing it. But that comment or action wouldn't find us if that wasn't the case. There are 7 billion people on this planet. You're telling me there isn't a reason it's happening to you? Let me rephrase that. For you. There is always something in it for us, even in the shittiest of shit situations. Would you rather live in a world where shit just happens and it has no rhyme or reason and no benefit to you? Or where you can take what happens and use every event and experience and make sure it does not get wasted? Life is so very short. And when you've seen bad stuff and felt it on a core level, we get to be the reminders to each other that we might be living it through a lens that is making it harder on ourselves than it needs to be. Think of baking a cake, and you've put the money and time and energy into buying the ingredients, making it, and being excited about the outcome. And it ends up tasting like shit. Your first thought then going to blaming the person at the store that sold you the ingredients. But actually, if I take ownership that I made the cake, the solve is actually within me. I can go back and think, did I measure the salt wrong? Did I forget the sugar? We go crazy for a minute pondering. Then when we go, oh, as I look at the unopened eggs, I forgot to put eggs in. You know the relief in that? In those moments when we realize that stuff and it just makes sense and you get it? You know how to make sure it doesn't happen again, and you're excited to try again, and you no longer want to run and hide and never bake again. You just had to dig in and look at what led you there to that result. This is no different. Asking the person at the grocery store that sold you the ingredients, going back to them and saying, what did I do wrong? Tell me how to fix this. When they weren't even there, they might be able to help a little bit and give suggestions, but do you know how much longer that process is going to be? How much time you would have wasted? Life is no different. And to be honest, a lot of life is about ingredients. Ingredients to a fulfilling life. Ingredients to being head over heels loved and in love. But responsibility is a major ingredient in a lot of what we want to create in life. So how do we circle back to spiritual contradictions with all of this? Well, when we take it too far and get hard on ourselves for the things that show up in life that we don't like, we get so good at taking responsibility that we start to get back in a habit of blaming and being frustrated with ourselves, that we could let this happen, or irritated we did something days prior to create an unenjoyable experience. Can you tell I've done this? I know it well. And oh man, was I in that cycle for a bit before I realized it was happening. Let's just say reflections on top of reflections. Ugh, it makes me cringe when I think of it. But it happens, and luckily, I did the things to figure out what that was all about so I could shift it. The next little fun piece that can happen, I started almost gaslighting myself into feeling okay, when deep down, I wasn't. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I didn't know I was doing it. But sometimes we can use our tools against ourselves, and that is no fun. I could see the end result. I could see the solve. So I discredited the little nuances in between. I was bypassing the good shit. The stuff that makes us alive, the things that feel hard, which is funny because I'm all about feelings and being open and vulnerable and showing up for the hard moments and conversations. So how was this possible? Well, I got used to knowing what it was like to feel the release of a solve, and therefore chased that and started to not like the intense emotions. There was a part of me that thought, maybe that meant I was doing something wrong if I had big emotions or feelings about something. I'm spiritual as fuck. Why is my emotional mastery taking a back seat? But actually, what I started to understand is emotional mastery isn't about not feeling. It's about leaning into those feelings in all the ways and then seeing them for what they are and having a plan for what comes next and not beating ourselves down in the process. And a side note, even understanding they might not stop there. Sometimes we gotta go back through it. It's like acrylic painting, like beautiful abstract canvas shit. This is a new hobby I'm taking up right now. You should watch videos on artists creating. It's very soothing. The knife strokes, it's mesmerizing. It's actually super fun and much more relaxing than you might think. But the artist doesn't take one pass at the pile of paint they have squirted all over their canvas with their paint knife and call it good. They go back over the same line a few times and add a new color here and a splash of gold dusting there, add texture to another spot, and sometimes make a big mess. And, which I've had experience with, cover up a spot that was actually a favorite because I was experimenting. But any artist will tell you, some of their fails in their eyes end up being their most prized possessions or most popular pieces. What started out looking like a mess of colors finishes to a beautiful piece of art. That's us. Forward motion is beautiful. And sometimes within that, stillness is needed and retracing steps. But if you're learning something new or integrating something deeper to a subconscious level to create a new operating system or belief, was it really retracing steps or actually taking the next ones? You get it? You see how spiritual teachings are allowed to be contradicting? It's okay. It doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't mean you're using them wrong. It doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've never understood that analogy and find it a little weird, but I think most of us get its meaning. These spiritual teachings and tools are powerful and useful and impactful because of the person using them. Take them and apply it to your life like an artist. A splash of this, a splash of that, a fuck up here and a fix there. They are allowed to contradict and still make sense because it's the energy behind the little nuances that brings vibrancy. Not just taking a tool and blanket applying it to everything in your life. Pieces need to be broken apart and used in unique ways. My life is all about turning over rocks. To make it sound more magical, let's say turning over crystals. I gotta try all of these things to see what works and what doesn't. What fits, what doesn't. What confuses me, and what I need more practice with, and what is on autopilot. It's life. If you're doing it right, it will be messy. I don't think any of us would buy something from a painter if we saw their paint studio was stale and clean, that didn't have a lick of paint anywhere but on the canvas, or proof of life that things got created in that space. We want to know all the things were tried, that the process was raw and with curiosity. And the mess can be beautiful and the most intriguing part of it all. We're interested in the final product for sure, but interested in what it represents. That's why art has power and meaning and purpose. In the end, if we really want it, we don't ask everyone in the gallery before buying it if they like it or could visualize it in their home, because it doesn't matter. If you like it, if it works for you, if it expands you, then you have your answer. Okay, just because this episode's over, it doesn't mean our time together has to be. Check the show notes on ways for us to stay connected. And one more thing, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so excited if you chose to rate it, review it, like it, share it, or shout it from the rooftops to those you think might align with it. The more soul-aligned we are, the more beautiful, harmonious, and fulfilling this world becomes. We're in this wild ride of life together. Okay, that's all. I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you've been listening to Wild Voice.